The First of all, what is operation? I don't know whether you all do operating or some of you, but by definition, I say it's moving cars and scheduling trains in a prototypical or realistic manner. And there's two emphases. One is moving cars, which you do on a small switching layout. There's various ways of doing it. It's listed there. Um, it can be a very, very small layout. You can have operation if you're just working at doing industries. Or the other extreme is a big layout with lots of mainline and very few industries. I've operated on a couple that were out in that were based in Western US, either through the mountains or through the prairies, where their focus was on scheduling trains. Where are they going to meet? And do we add helpers and all this type of stuff with very little switching? So there's two extremes. And you can see if you're controlling trains, you got timetables, you got CTC, or you just have verbal orders. To me, operation is a combination where you've got trains on your main line, but you also have either towns or you have industrial areas where you do your switching. So I think the criteria for operations is you need a theme or a purpose, either a city industrial area, maybe a large plant with a lot of loading and unloading spots, or some small towns with grain elevators or feed mills or livestock pens or so on, or it could be a coal mine or a logging area. But to have a good operation, you have to have some kind of a theme. You should have a specific era. You should have industries that are large enough to generate carloads. You need a staging yard. Doesn't have to be hidden, doesn't have to be in another room, but someplace where trains can come into your layout and do their work and then leave, go somewhere. And on the layout, you need one or more yards to sort your cars and make up trains. Now I've got a few pictures here to kind of introduce my railroad. They were taken back in probably 20 or 21. Doubleheaders group in Kitchener-Waterloo puts on a layout tour every year. And through COVID, we did a virtual tour. So I did some pictures just as an introduction. So the setting, it's a prototypical freelance railroad. So it's a fictional railroad, but it appears like it could be a real railroad. It has its own color scheme, its own characteristics. I was getting into model railroading back in the 70s when Alan McClelland wrote his big series of articles on the Virginia and Ohio. And I thought that was really neat to have a railroad like that is your own railroad, but it looks real. And that's what set a lot of my standards, I guess. And mine runs between Buffalo, New York, and North Bay. Now, the name North Easthope is where was a township in Perth County, just west of New Hamburg. And we lived out there for about 9 years. Shakespeare is a little village at the south edge of North Easthope. That is my major city. It's at the south edge of my model portion. But I run south from there to Buffalo and I run north to North Bay. I set mine in 1975. It was just before I started developing the idea, but I liked all the old railroads that formed Conrail, the Penn Central and the Erie Lackawanna and Lehigh Valley. So I didn't want to have a bunch of blue interchanging with mine. I wanted some of these older names. So I set it, you can say, just in 1975. And it was designed for operation. I have staging yards at each end. Each one has a loop. You will go into the yard, go around the loop, and then into the storage track. There's 125 feet of main line between the staging yards. And operating has priority over scenery and buildings. I've been building this layout since 1991, and I'm still not done with scenery. A lot of my buildings are just placeholders, and at my age, I'll probably never get all the proper buildings built, but I've had about 196 operating sessions on this layout over the last maybe 10 or 15 years. And now I am getting to do scenery, gradually filling in the spaces. So, sort of looking at the model railroad as a stage, you have, or a play, you have a stage, you have the actors. So the set, all place names are from the former North Easthope Township where we were living. Shakespeare is the major city at the south end of the model portion. If you go north from Shakespeare, you actually come to a little crossroads called Amlerie. There was a general store at one time. There's about 4 or 5 houses. I have 2 branch lines that leave to go to Roxburgh and Burnside, which are all, Roxburgh is an actual little community too of a school, or was a school and a few houses. Burnside is just a school that was close to our farm out there. And then the last town you get to is Hampstead, which has a small yard and has a branch line going to Godrich. And beyond the model portion is an imaginary branch that goes to Owen Sound. And you'll see how that works out a little later. This is a schematic. If I do the smaller screen, I can actually scroll it up, but I found I can't on this one. But the bottom end is Shakespeare. And just off the screen is a line that goes south to Buffalo, and there's one that swings west to St. Thomas and on to Windsor and Detroit. And that's where my Western freight comes in. It's actually coming out of the same staging yard, but they bring them in so that it looks like a train's coming from the west or one from the south. The main yard in Shakespeare, let me see where the cursor is there, the north edge of Shakespeare. Just beside that is a small yard with engine facilities and a piggyback yard, which I'll show a little more detail later. As you go north, there's Amlerie, 2 branch lines to Burnside and to Roxburgh, up to Hampstead, and the line off to Godrich. I had to use a little modeler's license because the line to Godrich should go to the west, and it actually goes to the east here, so they could fit behind the backdrop. This is the one end of the room. The room is 26.5 feet long. It's 12.5 wide at the wide end and 9.5 at the other end. Here's the track coming up from the south and the one from the west, and they actually meet and run double underneath to about here, and then they go down to single track. And the south staging yard is actually underneath that peninsula. It's a long way back down in hidden track. And you see the main line. Oh, and here's the piggyback yard. It comes out onto here. Main line curves. I got to be careful I don't press down when I'm doing that. Main line curves around the back, climbs up over the top, goes down along. There will be a trestle. It's still spline right now, spline and homosote. Comes into the flat area here with the yard. We found that it was hard to switch cars, local cars, out of the main yard. Too much confusion. So I put a little yard in here I call 3rd Street Yard. All the local cars go into there, and when the crew comes up to do local switching, they don't have to bother the yard master. They can work out of their own little yard. And it's comparable to a big city where you've got little yards scattered around the city. Main line goes north, crosses a bridge here, goes around. It's climbing up to Amlerie, which is here. Sorry, here. And 2 branch lines. One goes up like this to the upper level, and the other one goes here into Burnside. Then main line goes around a helix, disappears here, does one more loop, and comes out down here. It's about 8 or 10 inches lower than what it is at Amlerie. And from here on is a backdrop to separate it. Then Hampstead here, and I'll show you a little more detail later, but Hempstead here has 4 tracks, three double-ended tracks. One fourth track goes back here to an industry and servicing, and then 2 long stub end tracks. Main line continues around, goes underneath this area. There's a farm and a propane. It comes out here. Now it's down in a valley, goes in between some cliffs here, and disappears in the north staging, which is under the oops, going the wrong way, sorry. And the north staging, it goes in and does a loop around the top, comes back in under here. So when I started, I was DC, or just DC, so I bought old Athearn locomotives, came up with my own paint scheme, black with the yellow stripe. I had some couple of switchers and cheaps, F units. Then Riv Rossi came up with a C420, which somehow caught my fancy. I always liked them, even though they weren't very popular in Canada. So I bought 2 of them. But about 10 years ago, I switched to DCC, and I found those old Athearns don't run very well on DCC. So luckily, a friend of mine was switching to O scale, and he sold me about 6 or 8 Atlas C424s and 25s, which have become the main power now. This one here, and a couple of Jeeps and RS3s. So these would be my locomotives from the 50s. These would be probably early 60s, the mid 60s. So as we bought newer power, we went to a little more modern paint scheme, less black, a little more yellow. Put the big initials on instead of the full name. Put a logo on the front, and that is the shape of North Easthope Township. So we made them up. My wife helped me design them, and a friend that had a good printer. we found we could print the letters in the shape, and when we tried to shrink it, the shape kept shrinking. The letters didn't shrink; they just disappeared. So he had a computer at work that he said he can do that for me and printed them off. And we have a little fleet of maintenance trucks, again with the logos on. A couple of trailers, number of freight cars lettered for North Easthope Central. Now we'll go through the towns. Shakespeare is the main classification yard. It has 2 double-ended arrival departure tracks and 5 single-ended classification tracks, and has a caboose track. And the yard lead lets the yard master work in the yard without blocking the arrival or departure or mainline tracks. And that is very important when you're working a yard, that you have this yard lead, that you don't interfere with the mainline traffic. And like I said, the 3rd Street yard is a small yard to serve industries. As cars come into Shakespeare that are going to stay in Shakespeare, when the yard master gets a chance, he runs a little transfer train over to the 3rd Street yard and puts them there for the local crew when they come on duty. And the pig yard is what we call downtown. You got to go down and around the little lower level there, and there's 3 tracks there. Engine terminal has a roundhouse, turntable, and some storage tracks. If Shakespeare was laid out flat or straight instead of on the curve, this is sort of what it would look like. This is the mainline track. Passing track starts here, comes down, and goes this way. Press down too hard again. And the yard lead is this track along here, down here, and down here to the yard. And so you see that the yard crew can work here without, the yard crew can work here without interfering with traffic coming in and out of the yard. This little track here lets the yard engine go over onto the passing track if he has to get any cars off of it. This little track here lets them go into the arrival departure tracks. And this track lets the mainline train come down into the arrival departure. So a through train that's just dropping and lifting cars will come in onto the passing track set his lift off into one of the AD tracks, or set his cars off, and his lift will be in the other track. He picks it up, puts it on his train, and leaves. The yardmaster doesn't have to touch it. Although mine likes to get involved with that too, but he shouldn't. The few trains that come in and terminate will pull right into one of the AD tracks, cut their power off, and go to the roundhouse. A couple trains that come in and drop their cars and then leave with other cars, they can cut off, run down to the other end of the yard, grab their cars, back onto their train that they dropped to get the caboose, and leave. And all that takes place without affecting the yard. And the yard's the switcher. There's an overhead view. Main line, siding, arrival departure tracks. I left a little bit of space there because I like seeing pictures of yards that have these roads running through them in the different parts of the yard. So I thought we need a place for car checkers to drive down along the cuts of cars and check them. So once if I get scenery done here, that'll be a road for the yard crew to go down and check cars. There's the 3rd Street yard down here. There's industries on both sides, and there's an industry back here on this one, and then there's 2 different types of cars that go into the back of the cereal plant. Coal for the boiler house and some corn syrup for sweetener. The grain comes in here into the hopper. As the cars are empty, they go down the little tail track. Shipping out here, truck shipping over here. I guess that's enough for that one anyways. Here's the yard sorting pockets. You can see that chassis is always in this track. It will get enough cars to fill that track and then some sometimes. Some of the others that don't get as many cars, I put 2 or even 3 into the track. They're not necessarily in the right order. The cards are in the right order in their specific heading, but the cars are mixed up. So once a track is pulled and you got an empty track, the yardmaster can switch that track with the multi-destinations and get another cut ready for another train that's coming. Hampstead usually goes north on a North Bay train. Excuse me, I need a little drink here. To the left of this box, there's 2 more pockets for the A&D track. So once the yardmasters put cars out for the train to pick up, he puts the cars into that box. Engineer can come and pick the cards up, sets his cards out there. Doesn't even have to hand them to the yardmaster if he's busy. He just puts them in the proper pocket, and the yardmaster can grab them when he's ready. There's a list of all the trains that'll be coming through Shakespeare in the right order. The yardmaster can see what train is coming in next, what train's leaving next, and plan his work accordingly. There's the industries in Shakespeare. The big one that you saw there is Centennial Mills, is a cereal plant. There's a Samuel Steel distributor, which isn't really built yet, but has a spur. Reynolds Wax Paper might get changed. Consolidated Chemical Shirt Factory. Livingston Warehouse, you can always find things to take to a warehouse. Shakespeare Reporter is the newspaper plant downtown. Arctic Cold Storage. Of course, the team track. Engine terminal gets fuel and sand delivered occasionally. There's the Arctic Cold Storage. That and the Centennial Mills are really the only 2 big industries that I've built. Centennial Mills was kit bash. This one was scratch built out of old election or real estate signs. So it's pretty flimsy. It's just a big shell. And it's patterned after a cold storage plant in Toronto that I used to deliver to when I drove for herb transport. You can see the herb truck in here with the old logo on it. So there's 3 doors. frozen in the back, fresh in the front, and either one in the center door. As you leave Shakespeare, you're up on the upper level here, up here. And as you saw in the earlier track plan, the track comes in at a much lower level going into North Staging, which is down here. And then just about here is the tunnel going into underneath Shakespeare to the North Staging. And if you turn 180 degrees at this point, there's the valley where the track goes into a tunnel back here. This is the line from Shakespeare. Those maintenance away trucks, when they had their picture taken, they were sitting up here before Superior Propane was built. Oops. Sorry. It's a little pond down here and a creek comes underneath. This track disappears in a tunnel right about there. And this is the Rotsburg, which sits up on the upper level. So at this point, the scenery goes up against it. You get a little further out, the scenery will go in underneath it a bit. Oh, Amelie, sorry. It's just a passing siding with the two branch lines. The siding is a little shorter than our longest train, which is not really very convenient, although usually if two trains are meeting, one is a little shorter. If two long trains meet, then and the longest one gets there first, he pulls past the siding and backs his back end of his train up into one of the branch lines, lets the other long train go by, and then he can pull out. So there, that's all Amelie is a little general store, a little barbecue, a little feed store, a house, and a little mock-up of a station. And back when I was quite young, I bought a new Ford pickup truck just about the same year as that, in that same color. And that's a 3D image of me standing there with my camera, ready to take a picture when the train comes. Off to the left is the track going into Burnside. And you just see the track here that leaves and goes up to Rotsburg. Then the last town on the layout is Hampstead. It has a passing track that's a little longer on the north end than the yard, which gives a nice yard lead for a northbound train, can switch, and the main line is still open. The southbound will have to switch off them using the main line as lead, but it is possible to have two trains switching there because of the long lead at the north end. It has two long stubs that face south. There's four double-ended, and one of them extends back into an industry and the engine servicing facilities. So any cars going north have to be in one of those double-ended so that they can be picked up from the north end. And the long ones, one is always southbound cars, and the other one is usually local cars that will be either spotted in town or on the Goderich train or going up to Rotsburg. There's two industries out at the north end of town. And of course, we have team track and engine service, and then the branch line to Goderich. And there's a there's a little view of it. Main line, passing track. This yard, I dropped the center down about, I don't know, maybe a quarter or 3/8 of an inch lower than the ends. So when you cut a car off here, it always runs to the center of the yard, no matter which end you're switching from. Your cars will always sit in this center part and not roll out to the switches. The line to Goderich goes off here underneath. The little team track comes back this way to the station. There's a cement distributor at the end of this track. And then if you go around, the passing track goes all the way to about here. And there's two industries back there, one on each side of the track. There you can see the line going up to Rotsburg. It's got its own runaround track, and then all the spurs are trailing. So you get up there, run around your train, and then you do all your work pushing back towards the end of the track. There's 4 industries, but 8 spots. And depending on what type of car you have, which spot it goes into. There's the line on its way up. You can just see the top of the cement distributor here. That's the Godrich track going back into staging. And the fellows run the train in when it goes to Godrich. When I'm restaging, I back it out, change a few cars, and then back it in, and it's ready for them to bring it out forward again. So that this coming up from Marie and heading into Rotsburg, and there's Rotsburg. And that whole section was built before we bought this house. I knew I was going to build a model railroad someday, and I'll build an end of a branch line. I can fit that in someplace. Once I designed the layout, it just didn't fit unless I put it up higher above the one end. So that's really the reason why I have the little helix, because I had to get the main line up at Marie high enough that it wasn't a steep climb to get up to Rotsburg. So once the train climbs to Marie, then the main line starts dropping down again in the other direction. So there's a chemical plant with two tank car spots, box car spot behind. Beaver lumber, anything a box car goes in the back. Flat cars, lumber go at the front. It's a scrap yard. And Rocks and Furniture has a track coming up here beside it. This is the team track. This car is just waiting to get a spot over here at the chemical plant. Burnside, the short branch line from Almareed, has 4 industries, and there isn't even any runaround. You run around at Almareed and shove your train into Burnside. So you can see the 4 industries there. The cattle pens are the only one that's really permanent. The others are stand-ins. Shrink wrap tubing for grain silos for the grain elevator. Little fertilizer plant there I picked up at a show someplace here, and that's just almost a scrap piece of building that's filling in for Snyder Manufacturing. So they get some steel. Someday I'll have some type of a thing that they built that I can ship out on a flat car, but right now it's just steel coming in, a bit of scrap going out. And then there's the non-modeled cars, the towns. Those are the ones that you send cars to off the layout. So at the Godrich sub, you've got Sifto Salt, Godrich Manufacturing. They get loads of logs and could ship out hardwood flooring. And that was an actual plant back when I was a kid. Godrich Elevators, of course, brings grain in, and Champion Graders, which was actually called Good Roads Corporation, but I don't think anybody really know what they did, so I'm just calling it by their trade name of their graders. So they get the steel, and of course they ship out a grader once in a while. Own Sound, I have Monroe Shocks, the glass plant. I discovered there was a Canada bread plant up there, so we ship a bit of flour up to them, and the lumber dealer. And Durham on the Own Sound line, it was Durham Veneer, so they get logs. And there's a coal yard and fertilizer dealer and some stock pens. So I don't think that many of my operators really care what's in the car or where they're going, but I do. When I'm putting together a list of cars or making up train and staging, to me it's more realistic if I can say that load of coal is going to a certain coal dealer up on the Own Sound line, or those logs are going to Godrich Elevators. And we do run a separate train down to Port Colborne, some acid down to Inco. There's wheat going to Maple Leaf Milling, and also over to Nabisco and Niagara Falls. There's steel goes to Welland Tube. I've discovered that maybe it wasn't called Welland Tube, and it was probably associated with Stelco, but we ship steel from Algoma Steel down to Welland, and I've collected a lot of black plastic straws from Harvey's, and I've made up 3 flat car loads of pipe. And instead of, every so often a load of pipe, they always come out together. A whole block of 3 cars of pipe. And then you don't see pipe again for months till the empties get back to Welland and then make up my loads, and then another train will come out, 3 more loads of pipe. Wood chips come from up north to Ontario Paper. And in Hamilton, we ship some soybeans from the States into Canadian vegetable oils, a little bit out of Procter and Gamble. We got some combines that come out of Massey Ferguson and Brantford. Appliances. I have 3 of the 40-foot high cube appliance boxcars, and they just circulate between Camco and dealers either in the US or Western Canada. St. Lawrence Cement in Oakville. Back in the 60s and 70s, they hauled cement to the south end of London, just south of the 401, and it was unloaded from the rail cars and put into transport trucks to be delivered in southwestern Ontario. Now everything goes by truck, but I can still remember seeing the short, stubby covered hoppers with cement down in London. So we bring cement out of Oakville into Shakespeare, from Shakespeare up to Hampstead, at the distribution plant there in Hampstead. And then CP, of course, steel out of Algoma. Both CN and CP from the north bring grain from Western Canada. There's a lot of lumber and paper coming out of the north off of Ontario Northland. No, my staging yard, both of them have loops, as I mentioned. All trains enter on one side of the yard, go around the loop into their assigned track. Both yards have a siding on the inbound track as well. So if I have a train that's coming in and its track isn't clear yet, I can hold it in that siding until its track is clear and then run it on into the yard. North yard is 5 tracks. They're long. I put my 13 cars, my maximum, and I can actually put a short train in behind if I want to. South track, I was a little crowded. I got 6 tracks, counting the one going in, but I've only got 2 that can hold a 13-car train. One can hold a 10-car train, and then the others are, the THB and the Port Colborne are always small trains, so they fit into those. My through trains, there's 2 that run Buffalo to North Bay, and they'll stop at Shakespeare and Hampstead, and 2 run south from North Bay, stopping again at both towns. The one goes to Buffalo. The other one I've now made a New York, or actually it probably should be a New Jersey train, runs into the big yard in Newark, New Jersey. And it handles car frames. I didn't mention that the one new industry that I've just put into Hampstead is a car frame plant. I had a friend that tore his layout out, and he gave me a bunch of 6, 7, 8 cars maybe of car frames. Now the cars weren't very good. They didn't have screw-in trucks, so I've rebuilt 4 of them. No, six of them. 3 of them are loaded, and 3 are empty. And the empties come into the plant there in Hampstead. And one particular southbound train picks up the car frames and some other automotive traffic and goes down to New Jersey. Ford had a plant down there. I'm not going to try to say the name off the top of my head, but That's where our car frames go, and our shock absorbers from Monroe are going down there. Then I also have an intermodal pair that runs between Oak Island Yard in Newark and Calgary, Alberta. So it runs it didn't used to have any work. Now we've added Tropicana cars on the head end when it's coming north. Most of you remember back in the 70s or so, Tropicana ran a unit train out of Florida once a week into New Jersey. There's a huge distribution building there across from New York City. But then all the product for Ontario was trucked. And I know Herb trucked a lot of that. Well, I decided, being as a model railroad, we should be hauling it by rail all the way to Ontario, and it's high priority. So the Tropicana cars go on the head end of an intermodal train. And I discovered that now that's what they do. They don't run a unit train anymore. They are running them on the head end of priority trains. So coming north, it has Tropicana cars. One gets set off, usually gets set off at Shakespeare. One goes to the cold storage. One gets put on a North Bay train. The other one stays on the train and goes through on CP up to Calgary. When they're emptied, they just work their way back in general traffic. So by the time that train is going to run north again, I've got two or three of the cars are back in south staging, and I'm putting back on the intermodal train. There's a few trains that terminate at Shakespeare. There's one train from North Bay, has local traffic and cars for connecting railroads, like Chessie, stuff that's going to go west on Chessie, stuff that's going east on CN to Toronto, Montreal, or stuff that might be going to TH&B. So it terminates, power lays over for part of a cycle, and and then it returns again with cars going north. I should mention, when I say a cycle, it takes about 2 operating sessions to get through my whole list of trains. So CP and Chessie, they run once a cycle, so about every second session. So these trains that terminate, one is the train on North Bay. One is CP, comes from Sudbury. It drops some cars at Hampstead. It never picks up any cars because it's a CP crew. They're not going to do North Easthope Central work. So they drop some cars at Hampstead, continue on to Shakespeare, drop the rest of the train. They go to the roundhouse. It runs with one SD40-2, so it has to get turned for the trip north, and then they go to rest. And then later on in that session or next session, they'll take a train north, stop at Hampstead, and pick up some cars again. Chessie comes in from St. Thomas, with a lot of U.S. traffic. It just comes in and leaves. It doesn't. They don't lay over. And same with TH&B. They come from Hamilton and Stratford, and they return again immediately. And they run with a TH&B engine. Chessie has 2 Chessie engines and their own caboose. And there's a CN transfer, comes from CN's theoretical Shakespeare yard, which is just out of staging. But due to a union contract, they don't take any cars back. So they come over, drop their cars, do a caboose hop back to staging, and then at another point in the schedule, we take a train from Shakespeare over to CN and do a caboose hop back. So there's my locals from Shakespeare. It's a Port Colborne train, takes cars to Port Colborne, and it'll come back next session because it needs to be staged in staging. So it's got a length of time it stays there. The Shakespeare Industrial works out of the 3rd Street yard. He's got industries. He's got the cereal plant and industries by 3rd Street yard. He also runs downtown and does the freezer and the paper publisher. There's a couple of industries at the north end of the yard that are switched by the yard master, kind of halfway between the locals' jobs, and then he switches the outbound cereal plant a second time. He told me one day, with 2 loads of grain going in there every time, and only one boxcar coming out, there should be a lot more product going out. So I said, okay, we'll let you switch it again. So it gets switched twice. The Burnside local runs out of Shakespeare, goes up to Amarie. It also does Superior Propane as it's going by. And then there's, of course, I mentioned the CN transfer that takes cars to CN. And then from Hampstead, there's the Goderich train, and it's a Goderich crew. So it comes in from Goderich, switches all the Hampstead industries, and then goes for rest. And later on, the crew takes cars up to Rotsburg, switches it, comes back to Hampstead, and makes up his Goderich train and leaves. I was having them rest again for a while, but I decided I needed to get the cars out of the yard. The yard only holds so many cars. Let's get them back to staging. I got stuck sometimes where he didn't make it to staging that session, and the next session he went to Goderich, and before the end of the session he should be coming back out, but he wasn't restaged. So I try to get him back to Goderich then as soon as I can. And then the Owen Sound train comes in. He'll bring in sometimes eight or nine cars. He has to sort them into the proper tracks in Hampstead and picks up his cars to return home. But I've since now have him switching the Dana car frames as well, because there's not really room to do that with the Goderich train. So a northbound train will drop off the empty flats, and not too long afterwards, the Owen Sound train comes in and switches the plant. And then again, not very long after that, there's a southbound train comes through and picks up the load. So those cars don't sit around in the yard very long. Now, of course, between sessions, each train has to be restaged. I don't just run the train into staging and bring the same train back out. I have quite a few cars that, excuse me, that are off the layout. So I will look at the train. I think a little later on I'll tell you how I do that, but I do switch cars out and put other cars back in. And every car has to be given a new destination. If it's gone off the layout or if it's gone to an industry, it has to have another destination for the next session. So that means taking bills of lading out of the car cards and putting other ones in, or turning them. And the cars in staging then have to be blocked into the proper order. Head end cars always come off at the first town, and the middle cars at the second town, and the tail end goes right through to the other staging. I mentioned that each car delivered has to get a new waybill, and each open car has to have a load either added or removed. It doesn't make sense to me to run a loaded car both directions. You see a load of coal coming north, and then see the load of coal going south, or a machine that's being delivered and the same car comes back out with the same machine back on, still on it. So every open car gets the load removed or added. Some of them have a false floor that I just lift the whole floor off. A lot of them have little steel pegs on the bottom of the load or little wire pegs on the bottom of the load that will sit into holes in the car to hold them steady. So I have a box of different loads that I can put in. There's about 4 or 5 different types of scrap loads. And there's lumber loads, machinery. I use the car cards and waybills, but I don't just use 4 destinations and turn them. Many cars are dedicated. If you notice back in Shakespeare, when I showed the car card boxes, there was a little yellow chassis covered hopper. There's 2 of them on the layout, and they just shuttle back and forth between Livingston, Michigan, and PPG and Owen Sound with the silica sand. So one is usually coming north to the load, the other one's on his way south and east or west. Propane cars, I think maybe I have two destinations for them. Of course, the cement cars from St. Lawrence Cement, same thing. They just shuttle back and forth between the two industries. Scrap cars, I'll just decide which scrap yard needs an empty. And I'll show you my system for doing that. When a box car is emptied, it might go to a nearby industry to be loaded, or it might get held. We always hold a couple empties at Shakespeare and a couple, one or two at Hampstead for industries that need empty box cars. And if I don't need that car at that time, then it goes back to its home road. And other cars may go to two or three different industries, but I decide where they're going to go and by a chart that I use. There's your load of sand from Wellington, Michigan to Owen Sound. So it says it's going to Owen Sound via Hampstead, or routing is Hampstead. So the Shakespeare Yardmaster gets that car, and he looks, oh, it's going to Hampstead. It could be going to Godrich via Hampstead, or it could be going just to Hampstead for Hampstead Industry. That's the first thing he looks at is Hampstead. Once it gets to Hampstead, then they look at the next destination. It's going to Owen Sound. There's my rack with all my bills of lading. And I am now the third owner of that, excuse me, of that rack. Let's hang on a second. That rack was probably made back in the 60s. And that fellow left model railroading, he gave it to a friend. And when that fellow left model railroading, he gave it to me. So the top line is boxcars. There's paper in the left, and then there's wood products. And then the next, most of the next two lines are origins. One is CN, one will be CP, one will be stuff that comes up through Buffalo, one is stuff that'll come through Chessie, TH&B. So when I need got a train coming on out of TH&B, and I got a box car, I go look in their pocket and see that there's a load for it. The rest of the lines are usually car types. Steel will have coil steel, other steel, scrap. Refrigerated cars, there's frozen, fresh products that are leaving my area going outbound, and Tropicana. There's one for covered hoppers, various things in covered hoppers. There's tank cars, there's food grade, chemicals, petroleum, and there's a few other miscellaneous ones. So when I'm making up my trains and staging, and I decide what load I'm going to put in it, I just go in here and grab a card and put it in the car. There's the train cards. Train foot 315, Buffalo to North Bay, starts in South Staging Track 1, works Shakespeare and Hampstead, and ends in North Staging Track 3. That tells my operators exactly what they have to do. And the dry erase marker is the DCC engine number. Well, it's the engine number that corresponds to the decoder. 333, the TH&B, a little simpler, just drop all the cars. Return is 334. And you flip the card over, there's 334. Goes back to South Staging Track 3, maximum 5 cars. Saves them asking me a lot of questions, so they still do. Now I come up with what I call a traffic generator. And it's a chart with every industry listed with each car type that's needed. Now, if I was a computer whiz, I'd have it all done on a computer, but I'm not. So it's a handwritten chart. Well, not quite handwritten. I type it out on the computer, but then I mark it up as I go. So each industry, I decide how many cards it should have. Should I get one every session, every cycle, or should I get one every second, or every third? No, I'm going to increase them a little bit from what I have. I've got some at every third, and that's not often enough. But if I make up a train from Buffalo, and I got a car going to one of these industries, and then I make up a train coming down from the north, I got a box car. I could go to that industry, then I look and see, oh, I've already got one going there, and it keeps me from getting too many cars coming into one industry from various trains. Um, I guess I pretty well said what's on there. Yeah, sometimes I get a session where I didn't get a car to that industry. Well, if it gets one every second session, every second cycle, then I can just do one the next cycle and the one after. If it had one every cycle, it'd be a little harder. But if they're spaced out, it just lets me not overpower one industry with too many cars. The Livingston warehouse was an example of that. Before I did this, it's easy to send cars to a warehouse. Anything can go to a warehouse. So making up cars from a train, yeah, we'll send it to the warehouse. And it might be a month later when I'm doing the other half of the cycle on a different train, I will send another car to the warehouse, and all of a sudden I got 3 or 4 cars going there, and there's only 2 spots. So this eliminates that. So that's sort of what it looks like. You can see the zeros and the ones. And I circle when I got a car sent. There's a lot of them that aren't getting cars as much as they should because I probably don't have the loads to fit them. Um, don't have enough steel loads. I've got coil cars are easy, but open loads, I've only got maybe one with flat steel, and I got one with beams, and I've got one with reinforcing rod. But I need to get some more with general steel shapes for some of those. I should mention too, back when I showed you the big rack with all the cards, you maybe noticed there were some blue cards on the one end of 2 rows, and those are empty request cards. They come from Micromark, same as the car cards. So if I have a empty gone somewhere, and I can look down here and say, oh, that scrapyard should ship a load. I'll take the blue card that says send an empty to that scrapyard, and I'll stick it in the car card, and now it's got a destination for an empty car. So I got a couple dozen of different destinations for empty cars. Covered hoppers, the same thing. Grain might come down south to the cereal plant, and I might send those empty cars back to Owen Sound to get something out of the elevators there to go someplace. So I just stick a empty request in, and the yard master knows to send it to that destination. There's my dispatch sheet. I make a make a list of all the trains that are going to run, and we never get down to the bottom. We'll probably be somewhere in where's my marker? Somewhere about in here in one session. If things go good, if they don't go good, we might only get a few done, or if we talk too long at break time. But I have a master list of the order the trains run, and I make up a new one. I put down whatever didn't run one session. I put it at the top of the next one, and add the rest of them. Now, I start out with the number of cars that are in the train if the train's coming out of staging. 5:30 is the local, so I don't know how many cars he's got. We'll know that once he gets working. 535 over in the left. There's the Burnside train. Again, I don't know what power he's going to get. I don't know how many cars he's going to have. I'll fill that in, check off when somebody goes on duty. And I like to keep track how many cars we've moved. So every train starts with a number of cars and can set off cars. If they pick up cars, I count that as more cars. I put a little plus to that number of cars over on the right side. At the end of the session, I add up the cars there, add up the extra cars, and we'll have anywhere from 60 or 70 up to over 100. And I make a note myself, like on these through trains, particularly 315 is the Buffalo to North Bay. I can tell the engineer, instead of him having to sort through his cards, how many cars am I setting off? I tell him right away, he's got 4 coming off. I can tell the yardmaster then, you can add 4, but because he only had 12, you can actually add 5. So I give him a heads up how many cars he can have ready for a train. And that's the end. Are there any questions?
Perhaps you could end your sharing, John, just so I can see more people.
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah, I said, I gotta find it again. It should be up at the top, I think.
Yeah.
My Zoom kind of hides some of that top stuff. Sure.
I'm seeing it bottom center right.
Well, I can just, no, that won't do it either. No, it still does my screen.
You got it.
There. Okay, thanks.
Great. Okay, any questions? You can unmute yourselves.
Yes, John, what is your average crew size?
Oh, optimum size is 5. 1 yard master, myself as dispatcher, and 3 train crews.
Okay.
But we've picked up a new fellow that's really a good operator, so we often run with 6 now. It's pretty crowded. It's
Okay.
crowded. It's crowded in the aisles. It's also crowded as far as the trains. You end up with 2 trains in the same place too often.
Yes, because you've mentioned that there's more than one dispatcher sometimes. Huh?
No, just one.
Okay.
I'm the dispatcher.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
But if we have an extra person, it just means another train is running.
Right.
So once in a while, then I'll add something like a ballast train just to get him out of the way, get somebody out of the way. Wintertime, we had a snowplow train once in a while.
Okay.
How often do you operate?
Every 5 weeks. There's 5 in our group that have layouts and 1 that doesn't. So we rotate every 5 weeks. For a while, I had another group that was here once a month, but they were getting up in age, actually getting close to 90, I guess. And one of them didn't have a layout of his own. And I spent so much time teaching every session. They couldn't remember how to acquire the locomotive, how to dispatch it. Couldn't figure out how to switch cars. So after COVID, I finally said, no, I'm going to drop that group and just do our Wednesday night group.
And how long do you operate for one session usually?
Start at 7, although we often talk for 15, 20 minutes before we get operating. We stop at 8:30 for break, and that often goes till 9:15. And then we operate until 10 or 10:15. I don't know if you fellows know where I'm living. I live in village of Baden, which is 6 miles west of Kitchener. So our operating group there's two fellows in Waterloo, one in Kitchener, and one fellow that was in Kitchener that now lives in Ingersoll, and myself. And the other one that doesn't have a layout is also in Kitchener.
How long
John,
does it take you to set up between sessions?
It takes me quite a while because like I say, I do a lot. I do a lot more than what the other guys do. So I can spend the whole afternoon or even more. But to me, that's the fun part because I get to decide what the railroad's going to do.
Yeah.
I don't get to run trains, but in the setup, I is where I really see it as a transportation. And
what's the typical train length, John?
13 is our maximum.
Hmm.
Yeah. So the mainline trains, the through trains will run anywhere from about 9 to 13. The TH&B and the other transfers, they only about 5 cars. Because if they run, I look at a horsepower too. If they're running with one Jeep 7, they're not going to pull 10 or 15 cars. You're only going to pull 5 or 6.
Yeah.
My yard master gets on my case once in a while. He's got 14 cars, and I can only put 13. Come on, John, we can put one more car on. The real railroads wouldn't worry about one car. But I said, look, the real railroads train is 150 cars. My one car is equivalent of another 20 or 30 cars.
What's your steepest grade?
Probably 2.5%, maybe.
Oh, it's a lot. Huh?
It's fairly steep. Yeah, the helix. There's quite a climb going up the helix.
Right.
And then going up to Rotsburg is fairly steep too, but we can only go up there with about four or 5. If they're small cars, we can do 5, otherwise 4 because of the runaround track.
Okay.
You only have a limited amount of space.
Right.
My big trains always have two locomotives. They're running two
Okay.
of the Alco 424s. So now the CP train has the SD40. It's limited to 10 because I say 300 per horsepower per car, but it can't pull 10 up that grade. So it drops some cars at Hampstead, and if he's got probably 7 cars, he can probably go up the helix.
Well, great. Any other questions for John? Looks like you have a very interesting operations there, John. I learned a few things tonight myself, which I always appreciate from these sessions. So thank you very much for your presentation.
Well, you're welcome. Yeah, I've been quite pleased with the layout from the time I built it. I never, other than maybe would have had the Shakespeare yard a little bigger and not on the curve. But other than that, I've been quite pleased with the way it works.
Yeah. Sorry, when did you start this layout?
91.
91.
Yeah.
Stands the test of time.
Yeah, it has.
Yeah, terrific. All right.
Very good. Thank
Sorry,
you.
go ahead.
No, it's just saying thank you, John. It was interesting. Yes.
Oh, you're welcome.
So we have nothing booked now until September. We thought we'd take the summer off, although June is available. If somebody had something to present, we could quickly put together something for June. So if you would like to do that, let myself or Willie know, and we'll schedule something. If not, we'll go for September. In the meantime, William and I are still discussing how to put together discussion sessions or question and answer sessions. And by the way, I would like to thank the people that responded to our questionnaire. We had close to 30 responses, which is the most I have ever had for a questionnaire response. So there's some very good suggestions, and I appreciate. Willie also received them, and we appreciate you're taking the time to respond to us. It helps us for future planning. So September, Bruce Leckie is going to tell us about Smith Falls retrospective, recreating CN Smith Falls facility circa 1955. Documenting the journey from an abandoned coach to an operating diorama demonstrating the appearance of the CN facilities in Smith Falls. So that sounds like an interesting mix of prototype and modeling. So we'll look forward to that. So as I say, in the meantime, if you have something you'd like to present for June, we'll certainly consider it. And if not, we'll see you in September, if not before. If we're able to put together one of our question and answer sessions or discussion sessions, you'll hear from us in the meantime.
Great.
So thank you very much. Appreciate you all attending. And
Thanks,
as
Malcolm.
always, if
Thanks,
you
sir.
have ideas, please let us know.